Everyone, welcome back to BGS. Today, I'm very, very excited to have the incredible Sana Javeri Kadri with us. She's the founder of Diasporic Co, a single-origin, queer-at-heart spice company focused on equitable and delicious spice sourcing. She launched the company back in 2017 with the goal of decolonising the spice trade by focusing on freshness, transparency, and farmer equity. Sana, who grew up in Mumbai, now lives in California, has been recognised globally for her work in disrupting the spice industry and building a more sustainable and ethical supply chain. Her spices are soon to be stocked in Ocado shelves in the UK, or virtual shelves, and I'm so thrilled to be having this conversation with her today. So welcome, Sana, to BGS.
Thank you. That was a great intro.
Hey, first time I've done that. I guess I would like to start out by asking you about what it was actually like growing up for you in Bombay. What was your childhood like, and what were your favorite spots to hang out and to eat specifically?
Good question. So I come from a really mixed up family and a very progressive, unique family. So both sets of my grandparents had love marriages. My dad's parents were a Hindu and a Muslim who fell in love, which when they got married was very taboo. My grandmother was one of the first female gynecologists in the country, my nani, and she met her husband and my nana at a ballroom dancing class. And they fell in love and got married. So there was these two love marriages. My dadi went on to found Save the Children India, which is one of the biggest NGOs in India today. And, you know, my nani was this like pioneering gynecologist. So there was these feisty women. And then my mom and my dad, so a Jain and a Hindu-Muslim mix, fell in love in architecture school, then found their way to Berkeley for their masters, and then came back to India to raise, I think they really were intentional in raising progressive, independent kids, which was not the norm in Mumbai in the 90s. You know, I was born in 1993, the same year as the riots in Mumbai. So to be a mixed religion kid at a time of like so much conflict and during the Indo-Pakistan War as well, was very challenging. But I come from significant privilege in Mumbai, and so I feel lucky to say that my childhood was also very idyllic. There was a lot of swimming. There was, you know, we all came together around food, and so one of my dad's sisters married a Mangalorean, so there was like neer dosas and prawn gassi and amazing chutneys. And then his other sister married a Punjabi, and so there would be like really amazing chicken dishes and like the hearty hatta katta Punjabi khana. And then my Abu's family is Gujarati Muslim, so there would be like these beautiful patti samosas, the most incredible biryani ever. And then my Gujarati Jain nani would make really light Gujarati cooking that had tons of jaggery in it. And we like everything sweet. The stereotype is true. So I think that the diversity of my childhood in Bombay was quite incredible. And also, India had just neoliberalized in 1990. So I often joke that my childhood was also like every capitalist experiment being tried out on us in real time. Like I remember when Coke started advertising on television for the first time. I remember when Nestle launched dahi or yogurt in plastic tubs and started advertising it as like cleaner than homemade dahi. So like I really feel like my childhood was also seeing India go from a protectionist state that really was doing everything in-house to global and specifically Western capitalism just like hitting us in the face. And it all being so aspirational. Like fruit roll-ups, Nickelodeon, Kool-Aid, and Nestle were the most like, and Coca-Cola were like the most aspirational things. So yeah, it was a complicated post-colonial neoliberal childhood.
Wow. That sounds like you have pretty much covered so many bases culturally. Did you ever yourself wonder, like, what actually is my identity?
I think my parents are atheists, and I don't think that's common in Mumbai to proclaim yourself an atheist. My brother apparently like in second grade proudly went to his teacher, and when they were like talking about what religion each kid is or where you come from, he was like, well, I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. And they were just like,
How did that go down?
no, I don't think very well. So I think that there was being a mixed kid in the 90s when that was not the norm. I think it's much more the norm for this generation of kids, was tough. But I was always told that I was a product of Bombay because my family is third generation Mumbai. My grandfather is an architect, and he was very lucky to have a prolific career and built a lot of the most important buildings in the city. So I think there was a lot of pride in like truly being part of the city and the building and the progress of it. My dad would always say, yes, we have significant privilege, so how are you going to be of service? Like that was the family motto. So I think I felt part of something. There was definitely purpose in the family. So the like mixed up identity didn't matter so much because we had purpose in who we were and what we were trying to do.
And you were encouraged to, I guess, find out for yourself what that identity meant for you.
Absolutely. I was really encouraged to develop it.
Yeah.
When I came out, I'll never forget, like I came out as queer, and I was chatting with my dad on the phone, and one of the first things he said is, I had no idea how he was going to react. And one of the first things he said is, well, I think everybody's a little bisexual. I was just like, yes,
Jackpot. Family
so,
jackpot.
You know, that tells you kind of everything about their approach.
On a personal level, Sana, obviously we're going to go on to Diasporic Co and all the amazing work you're doing. But when you were a kid, did you ever feel like, whoa, I need to do something kind of extraordinary with my life too because of all these amazing people in my life that are doing it?
I think I was definitely pushed to be ambitious. And I think that doesn't translate so well in America or even the UK because a lot of first generation and second generation kids often didn't have the privilege of ambition. You know, they were told by their parents, get a good job, bring stability, assimilate. And I have so much empathy for that. And so really the ambition that was put onto me and bred in me pretty much comes from privilege.
Yeah.
And that's important to name. But I think actually my dad always says this, that the kid that I was bullied all through school. I was a very sad kid. And I think it was because I knew that I was queer and there was something about me that didn't fit with society, like and not even, upper class society or Bombay society, but like Indian patriarchal society at its core, which makes sense now that I'm, a 31-year-old queer person in a queer relationship and a blended family. Like a lot about my life choices don't make any sense to like the general Indian population. So I think there was a lot of angst through my childhood, and I was honestly too self-absorbed by that angst to think very big. I was too busy like weeping in a corner to be like, what am I going to do in the world? And it really took leaving at 16 and being able to find my identity away from like some of the trauma of life at home to come into my ambition and come into what I wanted to grow up and be.
You said you were born in 1993, so was I. We're the exact same age. And it's so interesting when I think about the fact that across the world, like both of us were basically just trying to figure out what, I guess who we were. And there were probably so many people like us around that time in the 90s where we were seeing so many changes happening around us. I mean, in my case, coming from an immigrant family background, I was constantly subjected, and this is through no fault of anyone in my family, but it was very much this idea of this is how things are in India.
Yeah.
And it was outdated.
Yeah.
And I was constantly trying to strive towards those ideals that didn't exist anymore in India. Whereas you were kind of going through the opposite thing at that time, which
Yeah.
was seeing all of these changes come about, these amazing brands from the West that were aspirational, quote unquote.
Yeah. When I went to America for the first time, I was really jarred by the Indian Americans that I was meeting.
Yeah.
Because I was like, wait, the like beliefs that you guys have about India are from before I was born.
Literally.
Like, we're not like that anymore. And I'm totally aware that I live in, a very urban classist bubble in Mumbai. But even so, now I work specifically in rural India, and like our farm partners' kids are with it. Literally, our farm partner, Mr. Prabhu Kasraneni, who grows our Pragati turmeric, his nephew, Pavan, is like just a sweet, sweet boy. And I've known him since he was really young, because now we've been working together 8 years. And when I was with them last March, he's now obsessed with protein powder and lifting. Okay. And usually, every year when I go to visit, I ask what he wants me to bring back from the US for him. And it was always, for years, it was American chocolates. And now it was American protein powder. And I was like, how the times have changed.
Right?
So yeah, like India is galloping, like India culturally is moving so fast. And initially it was first and second generation Indians in the diaspora, but now it's also me in the diaspora. We are in a way being left behind in our values and our impression of India. And it's on us to keep up with what's happening there and make sure that we are not like nostalgicizing the modern Indian experience.
Absolutely. I feel that all the time now whenever I visit. And I only started actually visiting Bombay as like in my late 20s, basically, because our family aren't from there. And it was the first time for me, I was like, actually, no, I can get a cab in the middle of the night on my own. It's actually quite safe. I got told off for it. But then, now that it's tried and tested, I'm like quite comfortable out there. I don't think you can do that in every city in India still, as a female or as a woman. But, having said that, like, it was quite a culture shock. Speaking of culture shocks, when you moved to the US to study, did you actually feel like there were things that you had perceived or assumed about America that actually were absolutely untrue?
Yeah. So I had visited New York maybe twice because my mom's sister lives in Long Island in New York. And then I had visited the Bay Area, I think once, because my parents used to live in Berkeley before I was born. They went to Michigan for graduate studies and then went to Berkeley to work. So I'd been to America 3 times, which is a lot more than most international students. But I got into college in Southern California outside Los Angeles, and I had never been. And I think for a lot of American students, the idea of going to a college you've never visited in a region you've never been to is wild to them. But I just had no idea what I was signing myself up to. I thought America was Parul Masi's house in Long Island, where Masi makes like teplas for us, and where you go to the outlet malls and eat Taco Bell. I did not anticipate Southern California suburbia and the strip malls and the desert and the freeways and Trader Joe's. When I went to college, actually, I was vegan, and I also was not eating gluten. I was basically a pain in everybody's butt. And trying to eat on that diet in India was no problem, because, there we have so many millets, we have rice, you can eat vegetarian so easily. Trying to eat that way and be a college athlete in America, disastrous. So by the end of freshman year, like, I wept as I cut into my first steak because I just needed the protein so bad. And I didn't have a choice. And I was like, I'm just going to eat this and move on. Now I love steak. But back then I really didn't. So it was very, very jarring. And actually, I think the grocery stores are what helped me understand the culture. Like, I would literally just wander around Trader Joe's being like, what in the world are yogurt-covered pretzels? They were delicious, I discovered, but there was so much that I was trying to make sense of, because I actually went to America thinking I knew everything, and like I was going to this country that I had like seen on TV and knew everything about, and I got there and I was like, I don't even know how to talk to these people. So the first year was a real like, and I would say it took 3 years to really adjust, and now it's been 13 years.
Yeah. And, you're college experience and then stepping into employment. Tell me about, I guess, the choices you made around that time. Like, what actually did you major in? Is that how they say it?
That is what they say. What do they say here?
I graduated and you
Oh,
say
in
graduated,
this.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Or I did this
majored.
degree.
Yeah.
And what were your kind of first few steps into employment?
Good question. I majored in visual art, and I was specifically a photography major. And I actually worked as a photographer freelance for the first 3 years out of university and 2 years into running Diaspora and starting Diaspora. But I also was a food studies minor. And what that really meant is that I was studying the politics and anthropology and like history of food and agriculture. And the more I studied it, the more I loved it. But I've always been a much more creative person than I've been like a nerdy person. And so I was able to use the research I was learning in my food studies classes, but then express it and like almost like process it via art, and via making like large installations and creating photo books. So one of my thesis projects was I made a photographic book, and it was like an 80-page book about the history of the citrus industry in Southern California, and connected it to indigenous peoples, China, Brazil, colonialism. Like I was really like trying to draw connections using a fruit. So that like in a way, the work that I do now, which is really storytelling around beautiful ingredients, started as a senior in college, via this like very made up concentration that I created of like visual art meets food politics. And then I graduated, and it's quite hard, I realized, to get a job at the intersection of visual art and food politics that makes you any money. But I was lucky because there's a fantastic grocery store in the Bay Area in San Francisco called Buy Right. And it's like one of the pioneering grocery stores that really brought like farm to table culture to the forefront. They were working with the best fruit farmers and the best vegetable farmers to bring peak season produce into their stores and get it to people. And I was able to join their marketing team and quickly grow to becoming their marketing manager within a very short time span when I was very young. And I loved so much of it because I was telling the stories of the best peach farmer, I think, in the world. And, you know, the most beautiful strawberries that are dry farmed to make them sweeter, or early girl tomatoes. Just, I was able to tell stories of produce, and that was so special. The piece that I forgot to mention early on is that all 4 years of college, part of my work, you had to have work study, especially if you were on any kind of scholarship. And I worked at our on-campus organic farm. And it was, the highlight of my, like, everything. I loved working on the farm, and to be like a Bombay city girl who didn't know, honestly, where vegetables grew to farming for 4 years was so special. So what I loved about then my time at Buy Right was I got to tell the stories of farmers. And really, like, that journey led me to be like, I'm telling the stories of these Californian farmers, but really anybody could do that. There's so many other people who could even do that better than me. The stories I want to tell are the stories of South Asian farmers and the stories of Indian agriculture. And in college, I remember writing a paper about Punjab and Punjabi agriculture, and how the Green Revolution had actually devastated Punjabi agriculture, and how formerly very prosperous farms that were landowning, their water table had dropped and dropped and dropped the more chemicals and the more like water intensive agriculture they started doing, and how generationally they started going further and further into debt. So I had that at the back of my mind where like I knew that things had been going very wrong in Indian agriculture. In 2016, Indian farmers were like at their peak of suicide, which was just devastating. So I knew that there was a lot of things going wrong, but I also felt like, you know, we come from one of the most beautiful, rich cultures in the world. There must also be people doing it very, very right.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of your next question.
Before I get to that, actually, you talk about, I guess, going into supermarkets in the West and realizing that they just weren't really cutting it in terms of the flavor,
Yeah.
or, you know, a lot of them were years and years old, which is very interesting as someone who obviously consumes spices and cooks at
Yeah.
home. I don't know where my spices come from.
Most
So
people don't.
why was that such a brainwave moment for you personally, and why is it important for wider society?
So growing up in Mumbai, spices make up every part of your day, right? Like there are spices in your breakfast, there are spices in lunch, spices in snacks, spices in dinner. I put turmeric all over my body. Like an ingredient like turmeric actually marks birth, life, and death ritualistically, culturally, culinarily. Spices are part of our life. So then when I got to the US and I was trying these spices, I was just like, wait, this turmeric doesn't have any flavor. It doesn't taste like anything. Or the cumin doesn't smell like anything. And I'm used to, opening a jar of cumin and it being like, so I think there was a quality and a freshness that I had completely taken for granted in India. And I got to the US and I was just like, what is this stuff? And as we were talking about where the most beautiful peaches and the most beautiful oranges come from, when I was asking people where supposedly the best pepper came from or the best turmeric came from, I was not being given a straight answer. And it turned out that nobody knew the answer. So there was literally this this opacity around where ingredients came from, specifically when they were coming from the global south or specifically from South Asia. And the more I learned, the more I realized that the average spice on the shelf is 5 to 7 years old. That they're basically a spice is changing hands 10 times from farm to customer. The farmer is making no money. All these middlemen are making tons and tons of money. They're all making their cut. And then you're getting a product that's incredibly stale. So the more I learned, I was like, well, this is a scam. Why do we do this? And obviously the answer to why we do this is colonialism, where the British, but not just the British, the Dutch, the French, the Portuguese, they built a system that was solely prioritizing profit over quality, equity, land stewardship, sustainability, any of that. And they built that system hundreds of years ago. And unfortunately, even when we did win independence against our colonizers, the systems didn't change. Capitalism took over where colonialism left off. And that is really what felt really jarring and disappointing, that there's such an opportunity for the regions where these ingredients are indigenous to shine, like the foothills of Kerala where black pepper has been indigenous for on record 12,000 years should be like well known. In a way, Kerala black pepper is like the champagne of black pepper. And the French, the Dutch, they do such a good job of spotlighting, archiving, and celebrating their culinary history and their culinary culture. And I think I just felt this like really deep sense of we should be doing that for ourselves. Yeah.
Wow. Have you had big corporations come and try and kind of get you because you're disrupting the space and you're making it very, very known that actually single origin spices are possible?
I think I had this overarching fear for years of being canceled, where I was like, it's going to happen. I'm going to be canceled. This is the year. And that's two-parter. One is you realize that if you are transparent and accountable to your community from day one, you're kind of uncancelable because you told them before they could get you for it. Where I was like, yeah, I was kind of problematic about this. And like, I've changed and grown. Or yeah, I didn't have that all figured out back then, but here's like how I've taken accountability and fixed it. Because it's specifically for female founders, I think. Female founders taking on ambitious projects. you set yourself up almost for cancellation. And we've seen it again and again with Away, Outside Voices. There's a lot of these like big direct-to-consumer brands from the like mid-2010s that got cancelled. And it was really like, I feel like these female founders were set to higher standards and then set up to fail. So that's one piece of it. But I think, if we're thinking about the spice industry at large, there's definitely been copycatting of language. Like I had to create language around the work that we do where there wasn't language before. And I'll see people now put things on their packaging like small batch. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you're buying spices from a distributor or an aggregator in bulk. And then you're hand packing it with somebody you're paying $15 an hour into small batches.
Make it
and that is called small batch. So actually small batch means nothing because it's not like if you say small harvest, it's very different because it came from a small farm where it was harvested. But then like, is it small harvest and organic? Or, is it small harvest, small farm, but they still doused it in pesticides and didn't pay their workers well? So I think this is where like consumers understanding intersectionality would go a really long way for these words to be able to be used without any context and for large companies to get away with it. Like single origin is such a nebulous term because it could mean like Amul. God bless Amul. I think if you're Indian, you're very proud to know Amul. But like Amul calls their chocolate single origin when it comes from one country. That's not single origin, most of our farms are single farm or single estate.
Right.
And then we define single origin as when we're working in a very specific region, like our Pahadi pink garlic, we work with 30 villages. And so we call that single origin. So honestly, like, I think what I'm realizing is if you're a disruptor brand, you will use disruptive language that in time will be co-opted. And then it is your job to continue to innovate on the language until you have the economies of scale and the power and the heft that you don't need the disruptive language anymore. And that's really tough, right? Being a small business is generally a scam. But yeah.
How long do you think Diaspora Co has until it becomes,
big?
big in your eyes?
Big in my eyes. Yeah, I think we're already kind of big. We're bigger than I ever dreamed. When I was 24, 2 years in and writing the business plan, I thought that if we did 300K in revenue, we would be rich because as an art major, I didn't imagine ever making more than 50K a year. Like for myself personally, let alone a company. I just couldn't, I didn't have the frame of reference. But what is, in defining how many years or how to define big, we've actually done some social impact studies on it. So right now, we make about the mid-millions in revenue, and we have a team of almost 30 across the world. So we're not a small company, but our impact is that we work with 140 farms. And currently, on average, the farm workers on the farms earn about $4.2 a day.
Okay.
In order to be fully above the global poverty line, I stress global poverty line because in India, being above the poverty line is making more than 350 rupees a day, which 350 divided by is about $4 a day.
Yeah.
On average. So we our workers are being paid about 20 cents over like what is considered like the line. It's not great. By no means am I saying it's great. And so what we would like to get to is $5 a day. For every single worker in our supply chain. And the distinction I want to make is that I'm not talking about our farmers.
Right.
Our farmers make 4x above the commodity price and on average 10x more than the average Indian farmer. But that translating to their workers who are often lower caste, migrants, and get the shortest end of every stick is a system that is kind of still in progress and has not happened yet. So in order to get all of our farms paying their workers over $5 a day, we would need to grow in size 10x
Okay.
what we are today, which is like not a small thing.
No.
That's completely mad. It's very doable. Like, I think over the next 5 to 7 years, it's very doable. And we have a plan of how to pull that off. But it is 5 to 7 years. And I think at that point, if we are able to like build equity truly in every part of this supply chain, including our workers, and be 10x the size that we are right now, I think we will also have the economies of scale, the sustainability, the stability to feel like, yeah, we're doing our own thing. And frankly, you know, I've been in the business 8 years now, and the big guys are keen to catch up in terms of marketing lingo, but they're actually not that keen to catch up from a sustainability and an equity point of view.
Interesting.
Because it hurts their bottom line, you know?
Yeah.
And we've always said that we're triple bottom line. We're not just looking at it from a profit point of view. I really didn't start this company to get rich. If the goal was to get rich, man, I could have done so many other things. So, yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of information, but I guess my natural question off the back of that would be, how do we get more people invested in thinking about spices in this way and learning more about where they're coming from and investing in brands like yours that are actually doing it with so much intention? Is there kind of something there around getting Diaspora Co out there to more people? Or is there also another layer, which is actually educating the wider population more to make them realize that actually this is something worth investing more money in?
It's all of the above. So I think something we've struggled with is because so much of our work is social impact focused, you know, we're working directly with farmers and really like we're ultimately in the business of providing incubator programs to incredible regenerative farming families, and giving them the market access to thrive. That is like the unsexiest, most nerdy way I could describe what we do. Like, I'm really a 0% interest bank for 140 family farms who are trying to do something differently. And the like customer end of it is almost like a means to an end. So it's hard not to get preachy, but I really don't want to be preachy because I think what ultimately changes society and culture is how it affects people, right? And when it, or how something makes you feel,
Yeah.
and how something affects you personally. And when it comes to spices, the thing is, when you're buying diaspora spices or any other like really fresh seasonal farm to table grown for flavor spices, it's more delicious. Your food is more delicious. And I think that's just what we want to keep focusing on is you will be eating a more delicious meal by buying these, and you will need to use less spices than you usually would by switching to these because they are so much fresher and therefore so much stronger and more potent. That's one piece of it in terms of like, how does one change culture and consumers' minds? And then I think the other part of it is, yeah, how do you make it as accessible as possible? You know, we started with one spice. We started with turmeric. Over 5 years, we grew to 30 spices. I always said that we would never do a spice blend. We would never do a masala. Now we have 10 masalas because I realized that, you know, the average home cook wants masala that they can just like put in their cooking and move on and make it taste good. They don't want to be measuring and grinding and weighing 3 different spices to make a weeknight meal. So it has been a real exercise in don't be a snob, meet people where they are. And where they are is not basic, where they are is tired. And like, amen to that. And then the next step, which we're launching in August, is we're launching a masala chai that has black tea and spices, like crushed spices all mixed together. So all you have to do is boil it on the stove with, you know, your milk and sugar of choice. And then the next thing we're developing for next year is an instant chai where it's using all of our spices, our jaggery, an amazing milk powder, and you just add hot water. So it's also on us to figure out how do we make our spices more and more accessible. So we're doing the work of buying and supporting from our farmers, but we're shortening or we're making it much easier for the consumer to use it.
Yeah, and it makes sense that I think you pivoted into the blends because what you're really doing is a disservice to the farmers if you're not,
If we're not getting it
listening to
out
your,
there.
yeah, listening to your consumers' needs exactly. And everyone's so busy, and especially actually on a personal level, I love a packet of that instant chai. I realize like I miss chai when I'm traveling sometimes, and like comfort, and so yeah. It just
And you know
makes
what
it
I've
more.
struggled with instant chai is realizing that in order to make it melt into the water really easily and not have a residue, and for you to get that aroma when you add the hot water, they add a ton of fillers and a ton of oils, like
Very
chemical
interesting.
oils and chemical compounds, so that it like stays milky and consistent, like blends really easily, and so that you get that aromatic experience. So it's been really hard for us to figure out how do you make an instant chai without filling with junk, and how can it have a nutritional profile that is quality wise the same as if you were to make it from scratch at home. And yeah, that's been the
Well,
bane of my existence right now.
I think that's such a polite way of saying a lot of us don't actually know what's going into our bodies, right? And how do we as consumers, I guess, start embarking on just a much more intentional consumption journey? Like on a personal note, like I told you, I use what is easy sometimes for certain things.
Get it? Yeah.
In other things, like, because we're emotional beings, in certain things, I'm like, oh, I'm really intentional. And then in other
Yeah.
things, I'll just be pumping like, I don't know, plastics into my
I
body.
buy microwave popcorn and then like stick our popcorn seasoning on top of it. Like,
Because it cancels it out, obviously.
we're tired. Capitalism is very hard.
Are you tired, Sana?
Yes, I'm exhausted. But I also love my work. And it's been 8 years, and I still like it presents me with bigger and bigger problems every day. I have never once been bored by the work that I do because we are thrown a new curveball every day. And all I ever wanted was to not be bored. I spent so much of my school years feeling so understimulated and so deeply bored, that my life is now a roller coaster, and I enjoy it. It takes a bit of therapy and quite a bit of meds, but I manage.
You're there for the ride. Is there currently a spice from, all of the wonderful spices that you offer at Diaspora Co that you're loving right now and that you're using a lot?
Ooh, everybody asks me like the favorite, or I like that you asked me the current
Yeah,
favorite,
the
which I
right now.
appreciate.
It might change next week.
So I now have two little baby stepkids, and they're 2 and 4, and so a lot of the past 7 months of my life since I moved in with them has been figuring out how to feed two toddlers, specifically two white toddlers. And they have started to just love tandoori masala. And our tandoori masala was a labor of love. It has 16 ingredients in it, including saffron. And I've started roasting a whole chicken with tandoori masala from scratch, for them. And obviously, I add a little bit more yogurt for them, and I add a little bit of jaggery to the blend to like mute it a bit for them in terms of spiciness. And I've really been teaching them the difference between, you can say it's spiced, but it's not spicy, and that those are different things. Yeah, and I think just seeing my like little gore blonde babies like come to love tandoori chicken has been very gratifying. So I think right now it's tandoori.
Oh, I love the story behind that. That's kind of why I asked it, I guess, in the current state of your life. And
Yeah.
speaking of being a stepmom and having all these obviously other responsibilities outside of being a founder, does it ever get overwhelming trying to manage
Shit
it?
show. I think, somebody said like balance is a myth. You just like do the best you can every day. Like anybody that thinks work-life balance is possible when you run a company and you then have small children as well. Whew, sheer bullshit. Right now, my partner is a surgeon and a researcher, so he's just as completely slammed. And he is like a trans man navigating a very heteronormative cisgender world. And I'm a queer brown immigrant navigating a country that is like more and more toxic to immigrants. And we both have very stressful jobs and children under 4. So how are we doing it? I think we know that like we just have to give ourselves a lot of grace every day, and that our schedules are not going to look like anybody else. I actually cannot, like, when people are like, this is the ideal schedule to be most productive, you know, on Instagram there's like all that content of like, if you're not eating 7 bowls of protein and fiber every day, you're gonna die. I really just had to like throw that content out the window, because our days start at 6 a.m. with the kids. They're at school by 9. Between 9 to 4, we do everything we humanly can between like meal prep, work, and going to the gym, and maybe going to therapy. And then they're home by 5. We're with them until 8. And then from 8 to usually 10:30, 11, we're doing another shift of work. And so where, you know, in my pre-kids life weekends, I was really quite rigid about I hustle 5 days a week and I'm completely off on the weekends. That has now been thrown out the window. And if we have, you know, we split the kids with their mom. And so if a Saturday, if we have the kids on Sunday and not Saturday, that Saturday is a full work day because the Sunday is a full kid day. So I do think that our lives have been turned upside down, and it's a lot of like high-fiving each other in the hallway and just tag teaming through it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think every time we step back and get some perspective, we just feel like we're doing the really hard thing, and it's generally worth it, even though if it's chaos sometimes. It helps that we have a cumulative 4 therapists between the two of us, and a lot of medication.
You're making it work somehow or the other.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I'm so glad that you're open about just the sheer like scheduling.
Shit show. Yeah.
Would you have it any other way though?
No. You know, I've had it every other way, and I've been really bored. And I've been unhappy. You know, I was in a very long-term relationship before this. He was married before this. Like, we've lived many lives before we arrived on this one. And I think there's been a real sense of the ambitious, busy, juicy, like want to squeeze life for everything it's got way is in so many ways also the queer way. And so, yeah, it's the way we want to live our lives.
You say Diaspora Co is queer at heart. How does the brand and I guess the values and the ethos, how do they show up in that way every single day?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this very famous queer line that nobody's free until everybody's free. And so much about queerness is about anything you want to be is worthy of love and is okay. And, you know, Ocean Vuong, the incredible novelist and writer, has this amazing line where he says, queerness demanded an innovation of me, and it forced him to say that like this is not enough, and the world and what I want in the world, I'm paraphrasing, but like I want more than what I thought was possible. And that was so mind expanding and beautiful that in a way queerness saved his life, because it forced him to just completely innovate and expand on what was possible. And I think so much of that is so diaspora. You know, colonialism was so violent and patriarchal and rigid, and it built these systems and this spice trade that was therefore so unjust and really rigid. And so when I think about diaspora being a queer business, it actually has nothing to do with sexuality at all. It's so much more a value system. It's so much more about equity and everybody being free and fighting for equity. And that's why I said from the get-go, like, this business was never about me getting rich. I would love for our farmers to get rich off of this company, but centering me is really not the point.
Yeah.
And the queerness also is about being able to all show up as our full selves, you know? For so long, you didn't know the person who grew your turmeric or the cuisine that, where, like, pepper is indigenous to Kerala. I didn't know what dishes people in Kerala who grow pepper make, you know?
Yeah.
There was no spotlighting of that. And I think queer values are really about that championing and saying, actually, this is who's behind it and they deserve our attention and care and support. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And it also does feel like a celebration. Like I look at your website and it's probably the only website I've seen that, you know, is talking about, oh, this is the actual name of the, you know, the full name of that spice, and they're unusual names, some of them. Possibly hard to pronounce for, you know, some people
We have a
around the
little
world.
button on every
I
page
know.
saying pronounce me.
Yeah, you've got pronunciations, you've got example dishes you can cook, and it's all rooted in research, care, intentionality, and just celebrating the farms and the actual product. I love that. So thank you for being so intentional with the way that you run Diaspora. And actually, I was on your YouTube channel yesterday, sitting on my sofa, doing my research, watching your YouTube channel. And I love all those little videos. I urge anyone who's, you know, just learning about this business to go to the YouTube channel and, you know, have a watch of all of those stories that you've shared about each of the farms and the specific products that are grown. I had no idea the saffron flower was so beautiful.
That stunning purple flower.
Yeah, and that the way that they pick the little stems and then they're processing them, and it's so labor intensive. It's, you know, like done by hand.
It's the most expensive spice in the world for that reason.
Yeah, and you know, growing up in Spain, like I've been surrounded by saffron, yet I've never learned about how it looks or how it's grown. So I love that storytelling aspect of it and the detail. But I think what really struck me when I was watching those videos was what's going to happen when the climate, you know, increasingly changes? Because, you know, we keep hearing that, well, South Asia is one of the, you know, target areas that's going to be impacted.
Yeah.
She's stretching. She's ready.
Sorry. Slept on my arm funny. I'm all good.
I thought you were bracing yourself for this question. But no, it makes me wonder, because there was one video, I forget the exact name of the chili, but it was these specific chilies.
Kong-hate chilies, yeah.
And I was just thinking, those farms are known for the right climate, for the temperatures that are able to grow the specific products. Are they going to start getting wiped out with the climate changing? Like, how is Diaspora, you know, planning for this?
So the magic is that regenerative agriculture, specifically like almost like agroforestry, where in farming they're mimicking a forest, it mitigates the effects of climate change.
Right.
So regenerative agriculture is truly a very effective climate change mitigation tool. So example, our Guntur Sanam chilies are grown in Guntur, Andhra Pradesh, which is a very hot climate and has been extraordinarily affected by climate change. Flash floods, heat waves, pest attacks. It's been really tough actually doing agriculture in Andhra Pradesh. So recently there was this pest that was like ravaging all the chili fields in Guntur, and most farms had 100% crop loss. But our farm, because it was such a diverse, healthy ecosystem, they're not just growing chilies, they're growing peanuts, they're growing garlic, they're growing lots of pumpkins, they're growing yams. They're really growing a ton of different crops, and their soil is so healthy. They only had 35% crop loss. Obviously, that 35% is quite devastating. And what they were able to do to mitigate that is we helped them build a mill on their farm. Mm-hmm. So even though they lost a lot of their harvest, they were able to buy chilies from their neighbors and process it for them, and therefore make up some money on processing. So that's one example. Or another example is there was horrific floods in Tamil Nadu, where one of our cardamom farms is from. And most farmers in that region lost 100% of their cardamom. But because of this organic farm where the soil was actually so healthy and the root structure in the soil was so good, the floods that wiped away all the other cardamom plants, here the cardamom plants were able to stay rooted into the soil and stay upright. So they did have crop damage, but it was minimal by comparison. I think they lost a significant amount. They lost about 50% of their crop, which is devastating, but it's not 100, and they didn't lose the plants. And cardamom plants take about 3 to 5 years to come to maturity. So when you lose plants, you're losing half a decade, you know, of new crop coming in. So we've just found again and again and again that regenerative, diverse agriculture that is mimicking a forest is the answer to mitigating climate change. Last summer, there was really, really awful heat waves across Gujarat and Rajasthan. And we work with a significant amount of farms in Gujarat and Rajasthan. And everybody was asking me, are your farms going to be okay? And our farm partner was getting on calls with them being like, are you guys okay? And they were absolutely fine. Because the compounding effect of regenerative agriculture is that your soil gets healthier and healthier, and your plants learn how to withstand more and more and more. So in total now, I think we have about 2,200 acres of regenerative land under the Diaspora name, which is so little compared to the total amount of like arable land in India. But I think what it tells me is that if we're able to get that message across, and if more companies and more farms are able to make that transition, there's a lot of damage control that can be done.
Okay.
And there are wonderful other organizations that we talk to, partner with, get advice from across South Asia who are doing that work. I think in America and in the West, it's easy to just feel like our governments and corporations are working against us.
Yeah.
And that it is just so frustrating to like live with the constant climate anxiety. And I think in South Asia, that's happening just as much. The governments and the corporations, I don't know what on God's name they're up to. Please don't cancel my OCI card. And the people who are living in tune with nature are making a difference in changing things and changing what the future might be. And we owe it to them to rally behind them and support them.
Well, humans are historically very resourceful. It's just where you choose to put your energy.
Power and money too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of, actually, have the recent tariffs impacted your business in the US? Have they?
Yes. I mean, so it's been about 3 months since they were announced.
Yeah.
And we're currently on the quote unquote pause tariff, which is 10%. It's hilarious. That's a pause. So in those 3 months, we've paid about $30,000 to the American government. That's considered the low amount. So we still don't have an update on what the new tariffs will be. When they were first announced, it was 27% for India and 44% for Sri Lanka. That will make doing business pretty debilitating, and we will eventually, if this continues, have to pass on prices to consumers. We haven't done that as yet. We've been eating the price, but there's only so far we can keep that going. So we're really hoping for an exemption, but man, I got tired just thinking about it. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds.
Fair enough. You are expanding quite a lot, and it's very exciting, though, to see how the business is growing. And we spoke at the start that you will be stocked in Ocado, actually before this episode airs. So tell me how that feels, and just seeing your spices coming from what was a relatively small business, that is growing, to see your products out there everywhere around the world and accessible to a much wider audience each time.
It doesn't get old. It's such a cool feeling. I walked into this really cool new store. I don't know my geography well enough to know where in London it is, but it's called Corner Shop. And I walked in literally to get a snack. I had no idea. And I saw a whole row of Diaspora spices, and I was just like, what? So it's a very cool feeling. But yeah, we'll go live on Ocado with 12 spices. And it'll really be us breaking into the British grocery landscape for the first time. And we launched in Whole Foods in the US last year. So there's been this almost 3-year process of scaling with our farmers. I describe it as the first 5 years was developing and stabilizing the supply chain.
Yeah.
And then the past 3 years has been scaling that supply chain, because working with a small farm that was growing maybe 400 kilograms before, and now trying to grow 4,000 to 5,000 kilograms to actually meet the demand, that takes time, and we have to grow at the rate of agriculture. And I think it still just feels like just the beginning, which is really exciting.
How amazing. Congratulations. And it's very inspiring, actually, to see the growth and the resilience through which you've, powered through all of the
long
different...
haul, man.
Yep. And I know it's a mess. We spoke about that. What are you currently very excited about?
Our cookbook comes out in March.
Okay.
And I started putting together the proposal for our cookbook in 2020. So by the time it comes out, I'll have been working on it for 6 years.
Wow.
And it is 100 recipes from that we basically sourced from our farm partners. So it involved Asha and I, Asha is my co-author and recipe developer, being on the road for almost 4 months. And we would go into our farm partners' homes, learn recipes from them, pay them US recipe development rates, make sure they were compensated for their intellectual property, and then adapt those recipes for Western home kitchens. It has been like, we just took on so much more than we could chew. And then it's been such a labor of love to pull it off and do it well. And I'm just proud and hopeful for when it finally comes out.
Very exciting. I look forward to that cookbook. I feel like
It's going to be seminal, if I may.
Who does your branding?
We do it in-house.
Stunning.
Sheer force of will. We've had a few different designers over the years, and I think we've been very lucky to be able to have really incredible designers and talent work with us. But it's always been in-house, and I think I've just always felt strongly about that I have a strong visual identity and strong aesthetics, and we like collaborating closely with usually fellow women of color that share that strong values. And then it's a really collaborative team-wide process. We're in the middle of upgrading all of our packaging. So in January, there'll be a whole new logo system, new tins, new labels, new everything. And obviously our senior designer, Kinshuk, has been leading that process, and she's brilliant. And every single call has me, our COO, our director of sales, our marketing manager. And I get veto power, but I don't use my veto power very often. And I will often defer to what Win, who's our COO, or Pooja, who's our director of sales, will say, and will like lead us in the direction of. So it's a very collaborative, iterative process. And I think that's what makes it so juicy and good.
Yeah, I mean, nobody is an island, and I cannot imagine, trying to do this completely alone. It just wouldn't be possible, right?
Exactly. Well, so often brands work with an agency and they just say, go off and do it.
Yeah.
And they don't understand that it's actually this like intense soul searching, like angsty process that you have to go through yourself to really get clear on what your brand is, how it looks, and what it stands for. And you have to do the work. There's no shortcuts on brand, I feel.
I completely agree. You can't just like put it into ChatGPT and be like, tell me what I should do.
I love ChatGPT. I use it for a lot.
Yeah.
But I think you use it as an aid, not as the heart. And I really want Gen Z to remember that when they apply for jobs.
Amen to that. Last question for you, Sana. What do you have strong game in?
Ooh. I think I'm a really good leader and manager. And I think it took me a long time to learn those skills. Because I had never managed anybody before. I was thrown in the deep end, and I definitely made some mistakes in the first few years. But I think I feel very strongly about like what it means to be a feminist queer leader and to really center that in my work, and therefore like lead with compassion and vulnerability and accountability. And I just really look forward to the next generation of business being fellow, like, radical, progressive, caring leadership.
Love that.
Yeah.
Do you mess up still?
Every single day. One of my best friends, we used to work in hospitality together, and he would start every service by, this is Sakib, who is now kind of a big deal. He runs Masala Maiz with his wife Norma in Mexico City, and before service he would say, we're all gonna fuck up. Tell somebody about it, drink some water, and do it with style. And I was like, that's fair. I like that a lot.
It's giving the bear energy. Just pure chaos. Let's just mess up and get on with it.
Well, let's mess up and be honest about it. And I think what the bear doesn't do is take accountability.
Very true.
And I think that's the difference here.
Sana, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
It's been wonderful.
58 minutes or 1 minute, 1 hour and 3 minutes whizzed by.
I know, it really did. I mean, there's so much more I want to learn about your work and just your brain. It just seems like a very eclectic place to be. But thank you for your work. I think it's so important what you're doing. So many of us don't know where our spices are coming from and how our food is being made. And I think that, lack of knowledge, there's a risk of it increasing with time. And so there's brands like yours and brains like yours in your teams that kind of counteract that. And I think that's very important for us. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I look forward to the cookbook, and I look forward to being able to order the spices on Ocado.
On the internet? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Hi, me again. Just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to this episode of Brown Game Strong. I hope you enjoyed it and got something useful out of it. If you'd like to stick around, then please hit subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can click follow to get updated on all of the latest episodes. It helps me immensely in continuing to bring you more exciting guests and interesting stories so that we can continue to learn about all the awesome work that's happening in our community. Thank you for your support. It never goes unnoticed, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.